Hello. Welcome to Muriel's Murders. I'm Muriel, and I love true crime.
I'm Nick, and I am not a fan.
Thank you for joining us. Each week, I force Nick to listen to me tell him a story of a true crime. Today, we are in Pocahontas, Arkansas to talk about meth, murder, and a snake in a box. Nick, how do you feel about the content of this episode?
Well, I'm very interested in Arkansas. That sounds good. The snake in the box sounds like the Lonely Island song. So I automatically have inappropriate visions. And, you know, meth is terrifying and also, you know, good for Breaking Bad. I don't know. I think this is going to be a good one. I'm very, very, very curious.
All right. Well, I like that. I like your openness.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes. As we say, you are open for the poking.
We don't say that. No one says that.
Well, this is a true story involving murder, violence, drugs, adult themes, etc. So if any listeners are like Nick and don't want to hear about those kinds of things, please consider listening to a different podcast.
And if I know anything about the two of us, there will probably be some swear words. So please keep that in mind as well.
All right, Nikki, are you ready to hear this story?
No.
Okay, let's get started.
That theme music is hitting right today, my beautiful wife. I'm ready for this story. All right, take me to Arkansas.
Right.
Let's go. We're going to Arkansas,
being
baby.
So positive, Nicholas.
Well, I'm a happy guy. I'm ready, and I'm ready to have my happiness squashed by whatever horrifying tale you're about to tell me.
Okay, so our story this week, it takes place in Pocahontas, Arkansas, around 2012.
Recent.
So this is a recent one. So I want to kind of set the stage for a minute. I have some maps for you. I have some things to talk about Pocahontas because I think it's important. Pocahontas is a small town in northeastern Arkansas. It's near the Black River and the Ozark Mountains, really pretty area. In 2012, the population was around 6,500. So this is a small town. And Pocahontas is the seat of Randolph County. So Randolph County is, I think, the oldest county in Arkansas.
Okay.
It was the first county to have a post office.
Nice.
So,
okay. Fancy.
Full of tidbits here.
Okay.
But what we want to talk about is the meth.
Oh, God.
Let's get started. So in big broad strokes, the meth capital of the U.S. does like move around depending year to year. Right now in 2021, the state with the most meth related seizures, which is how they judge the methiness of the meth capital, is Michigan right now. But back in 2012, where a story takes place, the meth capital of the country was Missouri, which actually was the meth capital for a number of years.
Okay, the reigning champs.
Yeah, they were the reigning champs. Missouri shares a southern border and the meth problem with Arkansas. If you look at the map, which I'll show you in a second.
Yeah.
Basically in the mid 2000s to the early 2010s, most of the documented meth related seizures were in the states clustered around Missouri. So Missouri is hot. And then like most of the states around there are also nice.
Yeah, the meth ripple effects are felt coming out of the epicenter.
Right. And, you know, a lot of meth labs are going to be in more rural areas. That's usually where people find them. And so like that area of Missouri, that southern area has a lot of labs, and then also that border crossing into Arkansas. So Arkansas's like northern tip has a lot of labs.
Okay. Yeah, that checks out for my whatever kind of assumptions I make about where meth is made.
Well, believe me, this story is going to turn a lot of your assumptions on its head.
Okay, great.
So go ahead and pull up this map that I have here.
So fancy, Muriel.
I know.
I'm very impressed with your research.
Yes. So this is just a map of Missouri and Arkansas. And you can see that little dot, that little red dot is Randolph County.
Okay.
And Pocahontas is right there.
Great.
So I'm going to show you an interactive map, and I want you to describe what you see. Okay?
Okay.
So go ahead and click this link. what you see here is a map of the United States. And remember what we're looking at. So we have Louisiana, right? That's pretty easy to find. Right above that is Missouri. I'm sorry, right above that is Arkansas.
Yes.
And then right above that is Missouri.
Yes.
And this is a timeline from 2004 to 2014. So it kind of maps the states by color.
Yeah.
So the more green the state is, the less meth lab incidents there are. And the more orange it is, the more meth lab incidents there are.
Well, what I see is that always in Missouri, you have the most meth lab incidents. It's never not the hotbed. The funny thing about it too is back in 2004, Washington State, where I was living in that time, I was living in a small town in a trailer, and everyone said that was the meth capital of the world. Oh no, never mind. If it goes back to 2004, it does get pretty hot.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe they had some claims to it. I just feel like everyone has some hometown pride and wants to be like, yeah, I mean, this is the meth capital of the world.
Well, that's why I'm saying, like, I think generally speaking, the meth capital moves around a lot, and meth use moves around a lot.
Right.
And right now in 2021, the map looks completely different than it did during the time of our story.
Yeah.
But you can see, this story started in the mid 2000s and ends around 2013.
Right.
So you can really see what we're talking about here.
So we're in the belly of the beast. We're in the hotbed of meth manufacturing and use in America for this story.
Right. And Randolph County is not the kingpin county. Right. So I have another map for you. This is the last one.
I see it.
Right. So this maps methamphetamine contamination from labs in around 2010.
Okay.
And you can see Randolph County is right.
Yeah, I see it. It's like in the upper right. Yeah. And and it looks like most of the orange dots are in the direct center of the state. And
also on the northwestern area.
Yeah, I see that too.
Which is still an issue now.
Okay.
So you can see the northeastern side of Arkansas doesn't have like a really crazy problem, right? Compared to the rest of the...
I mean, there's still a lot of dots, especially just a little south and a little east of Randolph County.
Right.
Yeah.
And in Randolph County, the dots are in the center of Pocahontas.
So I'm guessing where our story takes place in the center of that orange dot right there.
Right. It happens around Randolph County. So this story happens in the full like northeastern bordering county is kind of right in that area. But the main story does happen in Pocahontas. So I just wanted to show you that because... there's an interesting thing about this story. Like when I first started reading it, I had this image that it was just like the meth capital of America or this really crazy meth center of Arkansas. But the truth is, I think it's not. I mean, there's meth there, but there was places where it was like way hotter.
Yeah.
There's a lot of meth use, and it's definitely a big problem. But I mean, we'll get into this later, but the response of the FBI does seem on some level to be like radically disproportionate. Oh my God. So the FBI gets involved. So this is like a big story. It's a crazy story. All right. But it's just important to remember, like, we're not really, you can see here, there are areas where it's way crazier. Yeah. Right. Okay. So anyway, just something to keep in mind. So now that we have the stage set, we're going to take a journey. And I just want you to always remember that in the fabric of this journey, there is a lot of meth-related thinking. Okay. So if you've ever seen like Storage Wars or different reality TV shows, remember, and they're like, oh man, my storage locker has a bunch of guys, they did meth in there, hanging out in there. And they go inside and there's all these crazy inventions, like there's a bicycle that has like a hot plate wired to the back and then, a bunch of cans that are stacked. There's a lot of like activity. Okay, great. You know what I'm talking about? No, it makes me really want to see Storage Wars now, but that sounds awesome. Just remember, it's like, there's a lot of shenanigans associated. Okay. It's not the same as, potheads. Okay. Yes, I am aware of that. No, I do know that meth is devastating. Great. So it's 2001. There is a 20-year-old man named Jared Castleman, and he's feuding with a former friend and neighbor named Albert Coy Stanton. So Jared had sold Albert a broken-ass ATV, and Albert was mad about that. Sure. He said, you need to pay for the repairs to make it functional. I'm not even asking for my money back, but come on, man. You literally sold me something that was completely broken. Okay. So, to make a very calm and rational point, Jared and his girlfriend started doing donuts in the gravel of Albert's front yard. Okay.
Okay.
So they're doing these donuts. Albert doesn't know what to do. It's pretty out of control. They're angry donuts.
They're angry. Yeah.
Right?
Okay. They're ruining this man's front gravel yard.
Exactly. Albert then made a very mature decision not to call the cops, opting instead to grab his 9mm pistol, run outside, and shoot 7 shots at Jared's 1998 Chevy Blazer.
Oh my God.
Busting out the windshield, but somehow missing his target. So a lot of things are going on.
Okay. Enter meth-related thinking.
Okay, great. So when the dust clears, the police are finally called, and Jared Castleman's 52-year-old father, Bob Sam Castleman, enters the scene. So Bob is a Vietnam vet, former municipal judge, and prominent attorney in Pocahontas. And Bob Sam Castleman was pissed. Okay, Bob's a small, wiry guy. He worked for years in Pocahontas, and he had a reputation for intensity and also occasional erratic behavior. Descriptions of him kind of remind me of Alex Jones or something.
Okay.
He's got a lot of power. But he was highly regarded, and he ran in relatively elite social circles in town. For example, he was known to hang with this state senator named Nick Wilson, who used to terrorize then Governor Bill Clinton. Which is really... I had to include this because the story is insane.
Yeah.
Bill Clinton was out of town once with his lieutenant governor, and this guy Nick Wilson, because of his position in the Senate, was technically the acting governor of Arkansas while they were gone. So that's just, for 2 days or whatever.
Yeah.
But he went in, declared himself acting governor. He demoted Clinton's chief of staff and then tried to veto a bunch of bills, which Bill Clinton just undid as soon as he got home. But he's just wily. He's just wily.
Okay, great.
And this guy, Nick Wilson, was also later disbarred and sentenced to 7 months in prison for a number of crimes connected to the theft of $5 million from Arkansas children's programs.
Okay, great. So this guy Bob hangs out with him.
Like that's one of his
the
high class
version
friends.
of fancy people that he's kicking it with.
Exactly. So that's like a good example of kind of wild, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally.
Alex Jonesy, whatever.
Okay,
so Bob Castleman and his son Jared were really close. They had more of like a buddy relationship than the father-son relationship. Jared, for his part, had drug problems his whole life, starting as a young teen. And he also had a reputation as being tougher than his dad and more physically intimidating. He's also not a super huge guy, but he's, I don't know, whatever. People used to say he kind of acted like he was Scarface.
Oh my God.
But without any of the money or...
Yeah, right. Yeah, that guy acts like Scarface. What's wrong with him? Doing donuts in his front yard, that's also hilariously not a Scarface thing to do.
I know, but he thinks it is. He's kind of trying to be a badass on
okay,
some
so
level.
he embraces the Scarface title.
Oh yeah, no, he calls himself that.
Oh, he calls himself that.
People are kind of think it's funny.
Oh, okay.
So he thinks of himself as Scarface.
Okay,
he thinks he's kind of intimidating. He does the donuts in the yards.
Okay,
right?
great. Mm-hmm.
So Bob is on the scene. He's super, super pissed. He's really upset about the whole thing.
About the shooting of the car thing.
Exactly.
We're back there.
We're back there. So after the dust is settled, no charges were brought against the Stantons for shooting at Jared because obviously Jared was acting like an absolute crazy ass. So this does not sit well with Bob, the hotshot attorney, but time marches on. There's nothing Bob can do about that.
Sure. Yeah.
But he's not happy. So around the end of September 2002, the Stantons received a package at their house, and Albert and his wife were chilling in their car, and they opened the box and looked inside, and a 3-foot-long copperhead snake popped out of the packing peanuts.
Oh, damn. Snake in the box.
Yeah, this is where the snake in the box is. And, Stanton's wife, Albert's wife, freaks out. She throws the box out, and thankfully it actually falls and traps the snake under the box.
Whoa.
So the police are called, and there's a criminal investigation that follows, and they have in their evidence a snake, which was captured, right? So they have a snake for evidence, the box, and on the box were both Jared and Bob Castleman's fingerprints.
Nice. Okay.
So not a very well thought out plan, I would say.
Insanely botched.
Insanely botched. I also like to think, I researched these snakes, these copperheads, because at first you think, 3-foot long copperhead snake, and it's a part of the pit viper family. It's going to murder them.
Yeah.
The other piece of this is that their bites aren't particularly deadly.
Oh, so it wasn't even like a smart snake to put in the box.
Kind of. You know what I mean? Like, if it's odd. I think it would have just bit them. And they would have been
like, fuck, go to the hospital.
I gotta go to the hospital, yeah.
Sucks.
Right.
So maybe the idea was just to intimidate them.
I think so. I mean, when you start to think about, okay, well, it wasn't going to kill them. And it must have taken a lot of effort to find a live snake and get it into a box full of packing peanuts.
I don't know. Not for Scarface. Scarface knows a guy. He'll get a snake right now.
That's not. I mean, that's like, out of all the things you could do, you can also drive by their house at night with a gun and like look at them menacingly. Yeah. I mean, it seems very elaborate to me.
Well, seems maybe like a little Godfather-y. It's like the horse head in the bed kind of thing.
Yeah, it is. Except for then you leave your fingerprints everywhere.
Yeah, no, it's definitely the meth version of that.
So the whole thing proceeds to trial, obviously. These guys don't have a leg to stand on. I think the day that the trial started, they were going to try to enter guilty pleas. Mm-hmm. And the judge immediately was like, I'm drug testing you.
Yeah.
And those came back definitely positive. All kinds of stuff.
Including meth?
Meth for Bob, and then a couple other lesser drugs for Jared.
Okay.
But, the meth for Bob could have just been because he was at the trial on meth. I don't know how long it stays in your system. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like weed stays in your system for a while, but I don't think meth does.
Yeah, the judge could have been like, well, I'm looking at your actions that you're being charged for, and I'm seeing the way you're behaving currently in front of my very eyes. I'm pretty sure you're going to have to go piss in this container.
Yeah. So that definitely came back positive. So they kind of held the trial. And after the trial, on the courthouse steps, Bob is guilty, right? Jared is guilty. And he says, he's very contrite. He says, well, I'm not going to let a snake ruin my life.
The snake that I captured and put in this box. I won't let this hold me down.
You got the snake murdered, dude.
I know.
You didn't do anything to you. And at the sentencing hearing, he was pretty contrite. Bob Castleman did admit that he tried to take the law into his own hands after they wouldn't prosecute the Stantons. So, I think there was some leniency there. Like they really thought he was, had really learned this lesson.
Oh, okay. I get it. Yeah.
But it ended up being that Bob Castleman was disbarred and sentenced to 27 months in prison.
Wow.
Yeah. So
disbarred. Yeah. I mean, I guess that makes sense. He probably shouldn't be a lawyer anymore if he's doing meth and taking the law into his own hands, which is like, it's not a citizen's arrest. Like, how is that the law?
That's what I'm saying. It's like, there's the one thing is, right? Oh, my son got into an altercation. I'm a big shot lawyer around town. I'm going to try to intimidate these people, right?
Yeah, right.
And that's something that happens all over the country and all over the world, right? There's some internal logic to that.
Yeah.
But then the answer to that is, I'm going to capture a snake and jam it in a box full of packing peanuts, which to me seems like a nightmare because it'd be like moving around. Like, how are you going to get it in the snake? Yeah. You have to tape the snake in the box, and then you don't wear gloves, so your fingerprints are all over it. And then you send it through the mail, so it's a federal crime.
Oh my God. All right. So 27 months and disbarred.
Yeah. So we're going to fast forward to 2011. So Bob is now 62 years old. He's out of jail. And after the whole snake debacle, Bob buys this 200-acre defunct cattle farm and moves in with his now 30-year-old son, Jared. And he just is there to retire, to settle down and retire. And, just to keep our finger on the pulse of it, it's 2011 and the meth is still super a-flowing.
Okay.
Missouri is red hot. Everything around it is nice and chugging along with this meth thing. So one afternoon in April of 2011, the chief of police in the neighboring town of Hoxie gets a tip. A shady acting couple just bought a bunch of meth making goodies from a farm services store in Walnut Springs. So all of these towns border Pocahontas.
Yeah.
But it's just important to note that no one is actually calling any police from Pocahontas. If they have an issue with meth, they like to call the people from Hoxie. They respond a little more quickly for some reason.
Okay, an unknown reason 911 in Pocahontas is not responding to meth calls.
Right. We're just, other cops are taking care of it. So our cop from Hoxie tails the suspected pickup truck, and it kind of drives a little erratically. It drives over the center line. And so he pulls them over. And inside, he finds 62-year-old former judge Bob Castleman and his girlfriend, 30-year-old Becky Spray.
30 years old? So this guy got out of jail, started not only doing meth again, but now seems to be making meth and has a girlfriend half his age.
Right. Well, and Becky actually met Bob when he represented her in a drug case 11 years earlier when she was 19.
Oh.
In probably an awesome, super ethical circumstance.
Problematic. Great. Okay.
So, because Becky was actually on probation with the cops already, they were able to search the vehicle that she was in, and they find allergy pills with pseudoephedrine, lantern fuel, rolled up vinyl tubing, like all the things that when bought together qualify as meth precursors. You know what that means?
I mean, it makes sense. Or like, we know how you guys make meth. If you have all of these things and you were really shady at the farm supply store, like going in and be like, excuse me, sir, I'm looking for some lantern fluid.
Well, the thing they were doing too at the farm supply store is they would sit in the parking lot in full view of the cashier, and one of them would go in and be like, I really need some vinyl tubing, and she bought it and then would go back in the same truck, and then Castleman would come out and be like, excuse me, sir, do you have any lantern fuel?
And then Becky comes right back, you know what, oh damn it, I forgot the fertilizer.
They just thought they were like, well, if we don't buy it all at the same time, no one will know.
Okay, great.
Which is again just an awesome plan. The plans in this story are just mwah.
All right, great. Yeah.
Chef's kiss. That's what I was trying to do.
Yeah.
Okay. So Castleman and Becky were pretty much caught red-handed. And they were both arrested right away, and a warrant is issued to search his cattle farm, which has no cows on it. They just use it for selling timber and hanging out and probably making meth.
Okay.
All right. So they raided Bob's farm, and just a little side note, he had a samurai sword he was super proud of that he bought when he was on his tour for Vietnam. And then he also had a bunch of, like, a massive collection of arrowheads from all these different tribes.
That's kind of cool. Okay.
Yeah, they were all mounted on his wall.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So at the farm, they find Jared and his girlfriend at the time, Fancy with an I. And
wait, what?
Her name is Fancy.
Spelled Fanci. Yep. That is fancy.
It's hella fancy.
Wow, it's pretty rare for a name to be what it is, you know?
Fancy AF.
All right.
So they have like a bunch of digital scales in the house, lithium batteries, other kind of meth precursors.
Okay.
And then, wait for it, a meth lab out in the field. So they're in big trouble. Everybody's in a lot of trouble right now.
Okay.
Fancy and Jared are handcuffed and questioned. And at this point, Jared just starts singing like a canary, right?
Okay.
So he starts giving up all of the people involved in the meth farm.
Just snitching immediately. Very Scarface of him.
So he gives up a bunch of names, including the name of his best friend, Travis Perkins.
Oh, man.
So Travis at the time of the farm raid was 32. He was tall and a little husky, kind of a big boy with a buzz cut and a pretty smiley personality. I think he was actually smiling in one of the mugshots that I saw.
Okay.
So he's a graduate of Pocahontas High School, and he worked as a welder building flatbed trucks flatbed trailers from scratch. And he lived alone in this old apartment on the second floor in a windowless unit next to a junk shop.
Okay.
It sold like knickknacks and VHS tapes and stuff.
Second floor windowless?
Yeah.
That's a special kind.
I think so. And he was divorced, but amicable with his wife, Kimberly.
Okay.
She says he used to do really sweet stuff like buy her kids shoes with his birthday money. She had 2 kids from a previous marriage.
Yeah.
And if his mom gave him birthday money, he would like treat the kids to school clothes and stuff.
Oh, even after they were divorced and they're not even his kids?
I think he's a big-hearted guy. He was known around town as being a nice guy, even despite his drug connections and his like pretty public meth use, or the public knowledge of his meth use.
Okay, all right. Yeah.
He also would occasionally have a friend over. He really liked to play board games. And then the other thing he liked to do is set up targets around his apartment, smoke meth, and shoot them with bow and arrow. or pellet guns.
Oh my God. All right. Well, that makes sense to not have windows then.
Yeah.
You don't want to miss and then break your windows.
Yeah. So.
Plus, meth users like to cover up their windows out of paranoia. You know, here you can be paranoia free. You're just cutting out the middleman.
Yeah. So Bob's farm is raided. He's arrested, but there's also some more bad news for Bob at this point. An FBI agent named Ed Jernigan was the lead investigator into this influx of methy occurrences in Arkansas. So he was kind of the main pinpoint for that thing.
Yeah, he's on meth duty.
Yeah, he's on meth duty. And he happened to be very aggressive about keeping Bob on his radar after the snake thing, because remember, that was a federal crime.
Oh, because he put it in the mail.
Right. Mm-hmm. So not only is Bob's farm targeted, but the FBI agent in charge of this whole case is also like, this guy, I've had my eye on you.
Okay, great.
So they're turning up the heat. And in May 2011, a month after they found the meth lab on the Castleman's property, the FBI raided Pocahontas for the first time.
The city overall? The whole city?
The whole city.
Damn.
So they're trying to get some hands on some meth, right?
Okay.
And the FBI actually that morning had set up a tactical meeting with a bunch of neighboring police departments, except...
The Pocahontas Police Department.
Yep, except the Pocahontas Police Department itself. They didn't know anything about it because they were also a target of the investigation.
Of course. Sounds about right.
So the FBI swarms the town, and using basically the info gathered from Jared, they raided the homes and offices of their list of suspects of all of the people that he ratted out. And they're breaking down doors. They're throwing flash grenades. It's a really aggressive raid. They're snatching evidence. And according to Will Stevenson's reporting from the Arkansas Times, this is just an example, Travis Perkins was in his little apartment and they busted in, and one of the flash grenades lit the couch on fire. And he was so disoriented and freaked out, he tried to defend himself with a letter opener. He had a letter opener and he was just like, this couch is on fire. He's, get out of my house. Where's my bow and arrow,
Poor
man?
Travis.
I know. So meanwhile, the FBI also interrogated all the members, like a bunch of members of the Pocahontas Police Department. And in a town of 6,500 people, most people were affected by the raid. Most notably, Chad Mulligan, the chief of police, and district court judge John Thresh.
Okay.
These judges, man.
Yeah.
So
with shady.
Info gleaned from the Castleman's snitching a month earlier from Jared's snitching, the FBI had set up a sting operation outside of Judge Thresh's office prior to the big raid. And they caught 2 employees on the clock of Thresh leaving cash under a rock in front of the building in broad daylight, and then a third person sneaking over and swapping the cash for meth. And it turns out one of the people leaving cash for drugs was the chief of police, Chad Mulligan's wife, Trish Mulligan, and Travis Perkins was the dealer.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. So they're just...
They're all really connected.
Just doing drugs in front of the courthouse? Is that what you're saying? Or like the judge's office?
Yeah.
Oh my
in the middle of the day while
under
they're
a rock.
Yeah, under a rock.
And the chief police's wife is just showing up.
She comes out and gets her meth. And then Travis Perkins is dropping it off.
All right. Okay.
So pending all sorts of legal issues stemming from the meth lab on Bob's farm and the FBI raid, Jared was on house arrest and Bob Castleman was in custody when the FBI raided the town again in 2012. Yeah. So the FBI is like really digging in here. Okay. And the thing is, with 6,500 people, if you have 2 FBI raids, they're raiding everyone. Okay, and everyone is mad. There's a funny, Topics is this really crazy, funny website that, well, I guess not so funny, but it's an anonymous posting board for local news. And the people on Topics, they're a little hard to find the archive, so I couldn't find a really good quote. Yeah. But the people on Topics during the second raid were just pissed. Yeah. They were just over it. They're like, how can you do this again, man? We're just trying to get high. Like, why are you hassling us? They're not like some crazy like export capital of meth.
Yeah, you know? Right. No one's getting rich off of this.
Right. And people are just doing it, you know? So when the dust clears after the 2 raids, 8 people, including the Castlemans and Travis Perkins, were indicted on meth trafficking charges, which is, you know, pretty serious charge.
Yeah, it's legit.
And at this point, Jared, Bob and Travis Perkins were all getting super stressed. Bob so much so that he claimed he was experiencing all these crazy health problems in jail. And again, according to William Stevenson's reporting in his 2012 hearing over whether or not he could dismiss the evidence from the Hoxie traffic stop, he said he had major depressive disorder, persistent back pain, herniated disc, 13 kidney stones, an enlarged prostate, a staph infection, a pinched sciatic nerve in his leg. And he just said, quote, "I need to be back home. I'm not bothering anybody. I've not committed any crimes. I'm not socializing with anyone. No one is socializing with me."
Oh, he's lonely.
He's super lonely. And then he also said that his lawyer came up and he said, and after the raid, the gate was left open to his property and somebody came in and stole all his arrowheads.
That sucks.
Yeah.
That's horrible. And I'm sure all the kidney stones, probably most of that is just meth withdrawal.
I mean, he's like, that's a lot of
kidney
he's
stones.
Only like 63, man. He's not that old.
Right. Damn. Okay. Yeah. Well, the meth has not been good to him.
No. So he's super sad. So they let him out on bond. So that's how he got out on bond.
Okay.
And at this point, Travis Perkins, just to remember, he's looking like a super important figure in the Castleman farm shenanigans.
Okay.
As well as the FBI sting involving Thresh and Mulligan's wife, because at the very least, he looked like a connection between the meth-making Castlemans on their farm and the well-heeled clientele.
Right.
You know, at the very least, and at the most, he's like really super
So
connected.
he's the real Scarface.
Right. I mean, that's the idea. Nobody really knows what's going on. I mean, the trial hasn't started yet. They're just gathering evidence, but he's definitely seeming really prominent.
Also, just real quick, I made a joke a little bit ago about no one making money. Is that true? Was there a lot of wealth going on?
I think that you're gonna have to wait till we talk about the trial.
Okay.
But no.
Okay.
I mean, not really. It doesn't seem that way from what I've read. It's not. It seemed way more about people making meth to smoke.
Right. They're in it for the love of the game.
Yes. Then it is like they weren't shipping out millions of dollars and it wasn't a Breaking Bad thing.
Okay. And then maybe this is important, maybe it's not. I'm also have this whole time just been envisioning everyone as white.
That would be correct.
Okay. All right. Okay. I don't know if that's important or not, but
I don't know either. But
you're painting this picture and I just realized, like, what color were you using?
I don't know if that's relevant, but yes, they were all white. Okay. So Bob and Jared were worried big time about Travis flipping, even though Jared had easily outed Travis when he was first interrogated. Right? He gave him up real quick. And after Bob was out on bond because of all his health issues, Jared was back in jail for some reason.
Okay.
And Bob would call Jared to talk about Travis possibly flipping. And because Bob and Jared Castleman are super geniuses, they of course didn't realize that the police had tapped the jail phone lines and were listening to all their conversations.
Yeah, right. I mean, that goes without saying.
Right. I know. These guys are just, their plans are just amazing. Yeah. Also, by this time, all 8 living defendants in the case had struck a plea bargain, except for the Castlemans and Travis.
Okay.
And there was some debate as to whether or not Travis was planning on striking a plea bargain. You know, his ex-wife talked about how he planned on pleading guilty just to own up to what he'd done. He had been going back to church recently, and he had been posting a lot of very sad things on Facebook with like Mother Teresa memes and stuff like that.
Oh, Travis. Okay, he's trying to get his life back together.
Yeah, that's kind of what she was saying. Yeah. But based on public court documents, the Pocahontas Star-Herald did report that he was planning on pleading guilty on April 18th under a cooperation agreement with the federal government. So that did appear in the newspaper.
Okay, so Bob and Jared have a reason to be
suspect
worried
that he's going to flip. Okay. I mean, the newspaper reported essentially that he's flipping.
Yeah.
His ex-wife says he was going to plead guilty, but he wasn't going to flip.
Okay.
That was her claim.
Got it.
But nobody knows, exactly what was going on. So 5 days before his court date, sometime on Friday, April 13th, Travis Perkins was murdered.
No, really?
Yeah. He was 34 years old when a person wearing a wig and a trench coat broke into his apartment in the middle of the night and shot him once in the cheek and once under his chin.
Oh my God.
And when the body was discovered a few days later, he was found lying on his bed with his feet on the floor, almost as if he was about to stand up before he was shot.
Oh, Travis. That's so sad.
Yeah.
All right.
So we fast forward for a few months and we get to December 12th, 2013. Mm-hmm. It's the day of the Castleman's trial. And that morning, Jared Castleman changes his plea to guilty, leaving Bob Castleman as the only defendant to proceed to trial.
Damn.
Okay. So the following information unfolded at Bob's trial. So this is how we start. Bob let Jared and Travis cook meth at his farm in exchange for meth. And he also bought supplies for them occasionally, but not like a lot of supplies, and definitely not enough supplies for it to be an insane money-making operation. Okay. They pretty much smoked as much as they cooked. Okay. And people used to show up with pseudoephedrine, and then Travis would cook it and they'd smoke together. So it was kind of like, he just would kind of, it's like when somebody's good at making cookies and they're like, oh, if I bring you the ingredients, will you make me some cookies?
Totally.
And then here's some cookies for yourself.
Okay, great. I get it.
Tons of people in Pocahontas who used to buy and smoke meth with Travis, and the Castlemans elected to cooperate with the government and testify as witnesses. And they all corroborated each other's stories about the meth capades. So with or without Travis's testimony, basically the entire town flipped on Bob.
Yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't have mattered if Travis testified. Like there were so many witnesses.
Right.
Jared took the stand and basically confirmed what everyone in the town testified to.
Also just snitched on his dad?
I mean, yeah, kind of. I mean, he doesn't have anything to lose, right? Mm-hmm. All of those things are on the open with all these corroborating witnesses. Yes, Travis cooked the meth at the Castleman's farm with Bob's full knowledge and consent, as well as they all smoked tons of meth together, right? So that's what we know.
Yeah,
right?
okay.
On the morning of the third day of the trial, the government announces that Jared has flipped against his dad.
Oh,
so
God.
There it goes.
Okay.
And the bombshell is he would testify that Bob confessed to murdering Travis Perkins to him.
Okay. All right.
You sound so tired.
Well, it's just like this kid is just blowing it. He sounds like, I don't know, Chet Hanks or something, Tom Hanks' son.
Oh, yeah, that guy's the worst.
The rapper kid or something. It's like,
Jamaican accent.
Yeah, right. It's like, all you have to do is just like skate by. Like your dad's, your dad's fine. Just like, don't be horrible.
No, because he's flipping on him because then he gets to work out a deal where he won't see so much jail time. Basically.
Right.
Because they're all on federal meth trafficking charges. I mean, it's all pretty bad.
Yeah, okay.
So the reasoning that the prosecution made for including Jared's testimony about Travis Perkins' death was that they wanted to use the murder as evidence of Bob's consciousness of his own guilt. Because at this point, Bob's defense is basically like, I didn't have anything to do with it. It was mostly
I get it.
Jared and Travis, right? Like
right.
Travis cooked the meth. I just wanted to smoke meth, so I'd bring some stuff there, but I wasn't really into it.
Right. But if you're at her murdering potential witnesses,
yes.
then it means that you knew they had something to say.
Right. And that shows that you have something to protect.
Right.
That I have more culpability in this than I'm admitting.
Yeah.
So it's not a murder trial. It's just evidence to suggest that he's guilty of the meth trafficking charges.
Ooh, that's weird.
Yeah. So the prosecutor said this quote from the trial. They said, "This evidence is received for a limited purpose. You may consider this evidence only as a circumstance tending to show the consciousness of guilt of the offense charged in this trial, if you so interpret it. You are not to consider this evidence for any other purpose." So we're not looking to show, well, he's guilty of murder, therefore he's guilty of trafficking meth. You're really only supposed to consider the testimony about his confession as just about whether or not you think that makes him seem like he's more guilty. That makes sense?
It does. I mean, it also seems...
I said that in a crazy way. But it does make sense.
Yeah,
right?
It makes sense. It's crazy to me. It's like, we don't have to prove that he killed anyone, but he did kill someone, so that proves that he was guilty. And It's like, but you didn't prove that he killed him. I mean, did he kill him?
Well, let's continue.
Okay.
So according to Jared, The night Perkins was killed, Jared was actually back home. He was out of prison, but he was wearing an ankle bracelet. So all his movements are easily tracked by police. So he had nothing to do with the death, right?
Okay.
Travis's death. However, according to Jared, Bob went to visit Kim Cottle, a friend of Jared's living in southern Memphis. So that's about 2 hours from Pocahontas, maybe a little more. So Bob drove up to escort her to the dog races, as was their habit.
Okay.
They love going to the dog races. And then Bob left her at the track around midnight with his cell phone and some cash to gamble with and instructions to periodically call Jared. And then Bob took off for a few hours, driving in a way to avoid surveillance cameras.
All right.
So according to Jared, he then drove back to Pocahontas and wearing a wig and a trench coat, he busted into Travis's apartment, shot him twice in the head, and then disposed of the evidence in a river and drove back to the dog track, arriving around 4 a.m. So Bob didn't present any evidence for his defense, and the jury deliberated for a few hours before rendering him guilty on all counts.
What?
What? What do you want to know?
He didn't present any defense. They just said that, and then he was like, "Okay, I guess." So but he didn't confess.
Well, he didn't confess. He didn't say, he doesn't have any counter evidence. But I think part of that is that there was the evidence is all circumstantial, right? Like they didn't have a murder weapon.
Yeah.
They didn't have the wig, the trench coat. I'm not going to go like super far into it. But basically, Kim was a really good witness because Kim was like, yeah, he came over to my house. We smoked some meth, and the whole point of Bob's plan was to have an alibi. So he says, I was at the dog track with Kim this whole time. But Kim went to the trial and was like, no, he left for a super, super long time.
And he told me to use his phone to call Jared a bunch.
To act like, so
they could triangulate the phone to him being at a dog race, which, if I'm following correctly, was still going strong from midnight to 4 a.m.
Yeah, I think she was gambling all night. She was like, there's like a whole story about he showed up and he had taken too much Xanax, so he's like zonking out. So she had to drive, and then they did meth, and then he balanced out. And then he took off like a shot in the night. And at the sentencing hearing, the lawyers basically argued all the circumstantial evidence indicating Bob was the killer. This is where a lot more of that circumstantial evidence was presented. So you have like Kim's testimony. There's a lot of stuff that's still up in the air. Like the drive from that area of Memphis back to Pocahontas is real. You'd have to be going really fast and not hit any lights. And so the prosecution's arguing that he was just on meth, driving as fast as he could and not really obeying traffic laws in the middle of the night. But a lot of people, this is all like anecdotal, but a lot of people that I read like on Reddit and like different, internet sources were saying, I live here. I cannot imagine you could make that trip in 4 hours round trip and kill someone and drop the evidence in a river. Yeah. And then on top of that, Kim's testifying that he had taken all this Xanax. So it was like, is he in a position where he could have driven really, really fast? If he took enough meth, maybe. I don't really know. But I mean, there's a lot of the circumstantial evidence is definitely, there's some gray area to it. Yeah. The other thing that is true is that the bullets at the crime scene in Travis's apartment were damaged in some way that they couldn't forensically link them to a specific gun. But the bullets are a really rare brand of bullet, relatively rare, made by Cellier and Balat. And they did find the same bullets shot in a tree on the Castleman property. So there was definitely some connection between the bullets found on the scene and the Castleman property. But nobody could say they didn't have the gun, and no one could say they were fired from a specific gun.
Wow. Okay. So all of this is going on not in a murder trial, in this meth trial, which is not even meth. I mean, I guess it's meth trafficking, but really it's like you were just the party house.
Right. And they also added at the sentencing trial, this is something I didn't say, is that Jared wasn't the only person that Bob had told about murdering Travis. It turns out he also told his friend Doyle Emerson the entire story from top to bottom. So Doyle was happy to be the 1,000th person to testify against Bob. And Doyle also testified that he had sold Castleman a 9mm Glock handgun in 2010.
Yeah.
And that's the same type of gun that killed Travis Perkins.
So he probably killed Travis Perkins.
That's kind of what people are thinking.
Yeah.
And the government elected not to charge Bob with Travis's murder. Rather, they used Jared's testimony to then take advantage of federal sentencing guidelines.
Oh, so he basically gave him life in prison anyways.
So if a homicide's committed in the course of committing a crime, the sentence for the crime can be enhanced, but the burden of proof is way less intense than it would be if you were talking about a murder trial.
Wow.
So basically, Jared's allegations were enough to give Bob a 40-year sentence, which at 64 is essentially a life sentence.
That seems so shady for our Justice Department.
I mean, everybody talks about federal sentencing guidelines as being like super crooked when it comes to these drug crimes.
Yeah.
And that's like I mean, in this situation, I think it's likely that he killed Travis Perkins. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sitting here thinking we're putting away a super innocent dude.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he did not get due process for, any sort of murder.
Wow. And I guess the family never followed up with, we actually would like to get to the bottom of this.
There wasn't
murder.
a civil suit or anything like that. As far as I could tell, that was just kind of the end of it. I think it seems like everybody thought justice had been served.
Yeah.
I mean, he's going away for so long.
Yeah.
After the trial, a witness told reporter Will Stevenson, quote, "The thing of it is, it never was supposed to be no big deal like they made it out to be. It was just people trying to get high, and then it all got escalated into a big ball of shit."
So that guy's blaming the FBI.
I mean,
he's like, you can put Bob behind bars, but if the FBI hadn't started kicking everyone's doors down, then Travis would still be alive.
I mean, the whole thing kind of is like that. Like what they were doing, as far as anyone knows, he didn't get charged with some sort of massive trafficking scheme. I mean, basically, they didn't really prove he did anything else but get high in his farm with other people. He agreed to the whole thing and he bought the supplies. And I think that they were trying to kind of argue that he was facilitating, in this way. And like, Castleman's attorneys are trying to say, oh, well, that was like more Travis's thing. Travis was facilitating.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, it's Bob's, property,
House,
right? And he already has this other federal mail, like snake mail crime against him.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So I don't know. It's just like, but they couldn't prove like he's making $1 million a year. They weren't rich. They were just living on this shitty farm.
Wow. I mean, meth is a devastating drug that, crushes individuals and destroys whole communities. So, it's not like weed or something, or even shrooms or some psychedelics.
No.
The FBI should be investigating and tracking shit down, but
at the same time, it's like they didn't really prove anything other than people were just getting high and hanging out at this guy's farm.
They didn't even prove the one death that actually happened. Like they didn't even prove the cause of the actual murder.
I mean, they did based on the guidelines, based on like the threshold of proof they had to like satisfy in order to meet these federal sentencing guidelines. All right. So we've got some addendums.
Okay.
I don't even know if I'm using that.
Over.
I don't think I'm using that word right, but that's what I'm going to call it. So definitely, according to the internet, there's a lot of people that believe that it was not Bob Castleman that killed Travis Perkins. A lot of people think it was either John Thresh or possibly Police Chief Mulligan, just because it was that drive is so insane to get out there.
And those guys have a lot to protect, and they could probably frame Bob pretty easily.
Right. But I found that Jared's girlfriend, Kim Cottle, had a pretty reasonable testimony. She was like, yeah, he disappeared.
Yeah.
Like, we smoked some meth and he left all night and came back later. So she's like, well, why would he do that? And why would he want me to use his cell phone?
Right.
So I don't know. People think that it wasn't him, but I kind of feel like it was. Whatever.
Okay.
It doesn't matter what I think.
Yeah, you're like, all I do is tell the story. It's on you people to come up with your own conclusions.
Right. Jared Castleman was arrested for drugs again in 2018. It's pretty hard. He just is on his own.
It's so hard. Once you get trapped in that cycle, it's just like impossible to get out.
Yeah, it's pretty sad. So Chad Mulligan, the chief of police involved in this story, actually, I found out he was a DARE officer for Pocahontas Middle School in the 90s.
He's like, whatever you do, don't marry a woman who buys meth outside the judge's office.
Just marry someone with some discretion. So she was caught and fined and put on probation. And Chad Mulligan resigned. And he was replaced with this man named Cecil Tackett. He was the new police chief, who claimed later he was fired basically by Thresh for giving Thresh's wife a traffic ticket. So these are all the different things, okay?
Okay.
So chief of police Chad Mulligan, he retires, he moves away, he resigns, right?
Yeah.
And they don't really have a lot of consequence.
Uh-huh.
John Thresh keeps his job as a judge.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, you're fine, man. Don't worry. District court judge, prominent attorney, John Thresh. He doesn't have any consequences. Even though the drug deals with his employees were happening right outside his office, he kept his post. And then in September 2017, an officer attempted to pull over his wife, Beth, for speeding and inattentive driving. And she just refused to pull over and drove like 20 minutes back to her house in this police pursuit. And there's even like a little transcript of the 911, the kind of dispatch call where the guy runs, he's talking to dispatch and he's like, I've got this lady, she's not stopping, I don't know where she's going, I'm in pursuit. And he runs the place and then he says, oh God, it's Judge Thresh's wife. And there's this long pause in the dispatch record, you know, because they all just know like, oh shit, you know, we're in trouble. So they get
I'm in hot pursuit of, oh wait a minute, damn it, it's Thresh's wife.
It's
like,
totally,
I don't know, I guess
keep going.
I guess follow her, make sure she doesn't hit a child.
Right. So basically they ticket her. They get to the end of the street, they get there and they ticket her for, you know, bad driving or whatever. And Judge Thresh is pissed, right? So he calls this guy Tackett, the one who replaced Mulligan, this new police chief. So he calls Tackett and he chews him out. He calls the mayor of Pocahontas, yells at the mayor of Pocahontas, and Tackett actually dropped the ticket and like kind of tried to erase it. And a year later, Thresh supported his friend who was trying to run for mayor and beat the incumbent mayor. And then weeks after he becomes mayor, he fires Tackett. So Tackett's been on the record as being like, I'm pretty sure I got fired by Judge Thresh for giving his wife a speeding ticket that she absolutely deserved.
It seems like for all the corruption going on in Pocahontas, meth is one of the least of their worries.
I know. There's so many people getting disbarred. It's like, what is going on? And then the last year, Thresh finally resigned because there was an investigation that found he was sexting with one of the defendants in his court. So he basically recused himself from her case, but he was messaging her on Facebook being like, I'll get you out of paying fines, girl, whatever. And like she sent him a bunch of nudes and then they figured all that stuff out. So now he's permanently disqualified from holding judicial office.
Randolph County!
It took a really long time. Like a long ass time.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Well, I definitely don't want to do meth.
That's what you got from this?
I don't want to do meth. That's what I got from this. I do want to look into one of these all-night dog race tracks. If you had asked me, hey, Nick, do you want to go to a dog race? I would have absolutely assumed that it would end by at least midnight, not go all through the night, unless she was just so high on meth she didn't realize there maybe actually wasn't a dog race going on, which also would have been hilarious.
Her testimony was pretty funny because she was like, okay, so we got there and then we bought this hotel room, but he says we're not going to use the hotel room and he's messed up on Xanax, and then we smoked a bunch of meth and then he gave me money to gamble, so I just was sitting there gambling nonstop for 4 hours while he's gone, and her only job was to call Jared's phone, but she totally forgot.
Oh,
so there's only 2 calls. There's one she tried to call him when he says, "Here, take my phone.
Yeah.
I want you to call Jared while you're gambling." She says, "No problem." She tried to call him once. And then she saw him pulling up like around 4 o'clock in the morning. It was like, "Oh, damn it. I forgot to call."
Jared.
So like this alibi that they had about how like his cell phone was triangulated, she totally didn't do it.
I'm thinking maybe it was one of those things where it was like at a dog track. So maybe she was just on the like slot machines all night or something. Cause I think you can gamble like different types of gambling in a place where it's legal.
I think you're right. I couldn't really figure out exactly what this thing was.
I also just like the idea that maybe she was at one of those gas stations or something where you can gamble and there were like dogs running around. And she was so high. She just thought it was a dog racetrack. I don't know.
Yeah. Also, those things I think are pretty unethical, so we're not going to one. For this story, I referenced this feature article called "A Killing in Pocahontas" by Will Stevenson for the Arkansas Times. This is such a great article. If you're interested in this and you want a few more details that we didn't cover, it's an awesome article and it's beautifully written from a native. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Very cool.
I also referenced Linda Satter for the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, Paige Cushman and Maureen Glisovic for ABC 7, the Encyclopedia of Arkansas.net, and there's a cool website called the NEA Report, the Northeastern Arkansas Report, and they just have like a bunch of court reports from Northeastern Arkansas. That's just fun. It's like a fun thing to read.
Seems like you also looked around on Reddit a little bit to see what conspiracy theories people had about it.
Yeah, I looked on the true crime subreddit. And there was a guy on there who's from Pocahontas.
Oh, cool.
He had a lot of stuff to say. Yeah, that's about it. Oh, man. That was fun.
I think it was fun. I mean, you know, R.I.P. Travis.
Yeah, R.I.P. Travis. It's a crazy story.
Yeah.
And it's so many bad ideas. It's just like, I just keep being like, what? I feel like you could have done that, but just not like that.
Thank you so much for listening to Muriel's Murders. Muriel did all the research and I did all the editing and post-production.
Yeah, so thank you to us. To help support the podcast and to unlock exclusive episodes, you can sign up for a Patreon at www.patreon.com/Muriel's Murders. I've had to help my dad sign up for this. Believe me, if you're confused, just ask and we'll help you.
I also draw and animate tons of little cartoons to go along with the episodes. Those dominate our social media feeds. You can find us at Muriel's Murders on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok. Our DMs are open. Talk to us. We'll talk back. Plus, you can email us at murielsmurders@gmail.com.
That's right. And the cartoons are very good. So if you're curious to know what Nick thinks, because I always am.
What I think in drawing form.
Yeah, then I would definitely check that out. It's very strange. All right, please rate and review Muriel's Murders on Apple Podcasts, because guess what? It really does help us grow. It's not just our ego thing. It's like actual algorithms.
It also is nice for our egos. So, you know,
I mean,
for both things.
We need it.
Okay, great. Our music is by Mario Castellini. You can find him on Instagram at Castellini Beats.
Thank you to Ryan and Ryan at Campfire Media.
And if you want more Nick and Muriel, please check out our non-murder podcast. It's called Hella in Your 30s. It comes out every Monday wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay, bye.